Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In the distant future, humanity had always been the underdog in the grand expanse of space. They were not the most powerful, nor the most advanced, but their survival instinct was unmatched. This is a story about a turning point, when humanity's quiet departure from the Galactic Council sent shockwaves through the entire galaxy. The piece that held the galaxy together for centuries was now teetering on the edge of collapse. Commander Jack Walker stood in the empty command center of the last human outpost, his fingers drumming softly on the cold metal surface of the table. The stars outside flickered in the distance, but inside, there was nothing but silence. He had just received the orders, the ones that would change everything. Humanity was pulling back. The diplomatic missions, the peace talks, the negotiations, they were all over. Earth was no longer going to play by the Galactic Council's rules. They were done. Jack glanced over at the holographic map of the galaxy, zooming in on the fractured borders of the Council's territories. His mind raced. The decision had been made swiftly, and without hesitation. Humanity had made its exit. The once proud Council, composed of dozens of species, now faced an uncertain future. Without the humans' backing, the balance of power shifted dramatically. It wasn't just politics, it was survival. The once unified Galactic Council was on the brink of collapse, and no one knew who would take control next. A sharp alarm cut through the silence, dragging Jack back to reality. A red light flashed across the control panels. He stood up, his heart racing. The alarm wasn't just a warning. It was an emergency. A fleet of alien ships was on the move, heading straight for the human outpost. Their intentions were unclear, but one thing was certain, this wasn't a simple diplomatic visit. They were coming for something. Maybe for answers. Maybe for revenge. Jack quickly activated the comms, trying to make contact with Earth, but the line was dead. No response. He could feel the weight of the moment settling on him. Humanity had left the Council, but now they had to face the consequences. He wasn't just a commander anymore, he was the last line of defense. The last hope. But Jack knew one thing, he wasn't about to go down without a fight. He gathered his team of soldiers, each one as determined as he was, and prepared for whatever was coming. He could hear the hum of the engines outside, the sound of ships docking. They were here. The enemy had arrived, and this was no longer about politics or peace, it was about survival. As the doors to the command center slid open, Jack turned to his crew. "We may have left quietly, but they're about to hear us roar," he said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. The future of humanity wasn't going to be decided by a council of alien species. It was going to be decided by the actions of those who dared to stand up for what they believed in. The countdown had begun. The battle for survival had started. And no matter the cost, Jack Walker would lead humanity into the storm. They weren't going down quietly. Not today. Not ever. As the battle for survival began, Commander Jack Walker stood firm in front of the large window that overlooked the desolate expanse of the outpost. The stars outside shimmered, but Jack's mind was locked on the approaching alien fleet. His heart raced, but his expression remained stoic. Humanity had made its exit from the Galactic Council, and now, with their backs against the wall, they were ready to face whatever came next. But the uncertainty in the air was thick. The enemy's intentions were unclear. Why had they come? Was it retaliation for their withdrawal? Or was something more dangerous on the horizon? The silence inside the command center was almost suffocating. He could hear the steady hum of the power generators, the soft click of boots on metal floors as his team moved into position, preparing for the worst. But Jack had no intention of sitting idly by. The Council had underestimated humanity before, and they would do so again. Jack knew the odds were stacked against them, but he also knew the one thing that humans had that no one else did: an unyielding will to survive. "We've been underestimated before," Jack said, turning to face his team. "And we'll be underestimated again. But that's what makes us dangerous. They think we're weak. Let's prove them wrong." The crew gathered around him, each one with a look of resolve in their eyes. They were ready for this fight, ready to show the galaxy that humans were not to be trifled with. Jack wasn't just leading them, he was instilling a belief in them that they hadn't had in years. He motioned toward the tactical display, where the fleet of alien ships loomed large. "We need to hold them off, at least long enough to get the civilians to safety. We won't be able to stop them all, but we can buy time. That's what we do best." The team nodded, each member understanding the gravity of the situation. They weren't just defending a position, they were defending everything humanity stood for. "Let's move out," Jack commanded. The team scattered, taking their positions in the outpost's defense systems. Jack remained at the heart of it all, coordinating the defense from the command center. Outside, the enemy fleet was closing in, and the air crackled with tension. The sound of distant explosions echoed as the first skirmishes began. Jack gritted his teeth as he watched the enemy ships draw closer. This wasn't just about survival, it was about making a statement. As the first wave of enemy forces descended upon the outpost, Jack's team fought back with everything they had. The sound of laser fire, explosions, and the whir of machines filled the air as the battle escalated. Jack's eyes narrowed. He was no longer just a commander, he was a symbol of humanity's defiance. The aliens were relentless, but so were they. Hours passed, and the enemy forces were relentless. But so were the humans. They held their ground, pushing back the attackers, one wave at a time. Jack's team had been through hell before, and they weren't about to let anyone dictate their future now. As the night wore on, Jack looked out over the battlefield. The stars above seemed as distant as ever, but the light they cast seemed to flicker with a new kind of hope. Humanity might have left the Galactic Council, but they had not given up on themselves. They had not given up on their future. And as long as Jack Walker was in command, they never would. The battle continued to rage outside, the hum of blaster fire and the deep rumble of explosions filling the air. Commander Jack Walker stood resolute, his eyes locked on the tactical display as the enemy fleet advanced, their ships cutting through the void with terrifying precision. He had hoped for a swift victory, but deep down, he knew that this fight would be one for the history books. This was no longer just a skirmish, it was humanity's stand. As the first wave of alien fighters descended upon the human outpost, Jack's orders were clear: hold the line at all costs. His team had already proven their courage, but now the real test was upon them. His fingers flew over the controls, coordinating fire from the heavy artillery positions, while the rest of the team kept up their defense, moving with military precision. The enemy ships were relentless, bombarding the outpost with energy blasts that shook the walls and sent sparks flying through the air. Inside, the team fought back fiercely, their weapons blazing, but it was clear that they were outnumbered. "We can't keep this up forever," Jack muttered to himself, watching the fight unfold in real time. He knew the odds were slipping away with each passing second. Yet, he refused to back down. He had made a vow to his people, and he would not let them fall. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sarah Fields, one of Jack's most trusted officers, was on the front lines. She moved with deadly efficiency, issuing commands over the comms, and directing fire with a level of calm that matched Jack's own. She was a born leader, and as Jack's right hand, she was making sure the defense was as coordinated as possible. "Commander, we've got enemy infantry advancing from the south," Sarah's voice crackled over the comms, urgent but steady. Jack's eyes immediately flicked to the sensor readouts, confirming the report. A new wave of enemy forces had begun their ground assault. He knew that if they could hold them off here, the tide might turn. "Deploy the reserve team to intercept them," Jack ordered, his voice steady. He turned back to the main display, watching as the remaining human forces held firm against the relentless alien onslaught. Sarah's team was in position, but the enemy's numbers seemed endless. Jack's mind raced. The human Outpost had been a symbol of resilience, but now, it was a symbol of desperation. If they couldn't push back now, the last bastion of human resistance would crumble. As if answering his thoughts, the ground shook violently, the unmistakable sound of heavy bombardment reverberating through the walls. Jack's grip tightened on the console. "They're throwing everything at us now," he said through gritted teeth. "But we're not giving up." His words were sharp and firm, carrying the weight of his leadership, his responsibility to every human on that station. Meanwhile, in the chaos of battle, Sarah and her team held their ground, expertly using cover and suppression fire to slow the advancing alien forces. The stakes had never been higher. Each life on that battlefield mattered, and Sarah knew that Jack was counting on her. "We've got this, Commander," Sarah's voice echoed in his earpiece, steady despite the chaos. "We'll make it through." Jack felt a surge of pride and determination. She was right. No matter how impossible it seemed, they couldn't afford to quit. They had come too far, and humanity's survival depended on their courage, their will to fight for their future. The alien forces, now in full assault, pushed forward, but Jack wasn't backing down. He wasn't just fighting for this outpost, he was fighting for everything humanity had worked for the future of his people. As the battle raged on, the sound of distant explosions filled the air, but Jack remained focused. He watched the tactics unfold, every movement calculated, every decision critical. His mind raced through possible scenarios, but one thing was certain, as long as he breathed, he would lead his people to victory. "Push them back!" Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. His words carried a raw intensity, and as if on cue, his forces rallied, pushing back against the advancing aliens with renewed strength. The battle had only just begun, but in that moment, Jack felt the fire of hope reignite within him. They had one chance, and they were going to take it. Together, they would stand, and together, they would fight. Jack knew they would leave a mark on the galaxy that could never be erased. The fight raged on, but as the hours dragged by, something changed. The human forces, despite their dwindling numbers and resources, began to find a rhythm in the chaos. The aliens, initially so overwhelming, had started to falter. Commander Jack Walker stood at the heart of the command center, his hands clenched into fists as he watched the tactical display flicker. The alien forces were retreating, just a little, but it was a start. It was the break they needed. "We've got them on the run, Commander," Sarah's voice came through the comms, steady and confident despite the ongoing onslaught. Jack didn't reply immediately, instead, he focused on the screen, his mind processing the battlefield as if it were a game of chess. He knew this was their chance. If they could break the enemy's morale now, they could win. But that wasn't going to be easy. The aliens were relentless, and they would regroup. Jack knew they didn't have much time. "Stay sharp, Sarah," Jack replied, his voice calm but firm. "We've pushed them back, but this fight isn't over. Not by a long shot." His eyes scanned the lines of soldiers in the field, holding their ground with everything they had. Jack could see the exhaustion in their movements, the strain in their eyes, but there was something else: resolve. Humanity had always been the underdog in this galaxy, but now, for the first time, they were beginning to fight back with a fire that could not be extinguished. As the human forces regrouped and fortified their position, the enemy's next wave hit harder than anything they had faced before. The ground shook violently as bombs exploded around them, but this time, the humans were ready. Sarah's team responded with precision, their coordinated attacks pushing the enemy forces back once more. "Commander, we've got a breach in the eastern defense." Lieutenant Sarah's voice crackled over the comms, urgency in her tone. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The eastern defense line was the weakest point. If the enemy broke through there, it could mean the end. "I'm on it," Jack replied quickly, not wasting a second. He turned to the nearest officer, his orders swift and clear. "Send backup to the eastern line, now. We need to reinforce it before they get through." He didn't wait for a response, he was already on his way, his feet pounding down the narrow hallways of the command center, the weight of responsibility heavier than ever before. As he reached the eastern flank, he could see the chaos firsthand. The enemy was pushing through, but The humans weren't backing down. Soldiers fought with everything they had, holding their ground inch by inch, even as the alien forces advanced. Jack couldn't help but admire their courage. "Hold the line," he shouted, rallying his troops. "We've come too far to give up now." His words were like a spark, igniting something in the soldiers' hearts. They fought back with renewed strength, pushing the alien forces back yet again. But even as they fought valiantly, Jack knew this wasn't enough. They needed to end this now, before the enemy had a chance to regroup and strike back with full force. "Sarah, bring the heavy artillery online," Jack ordered. "We're not just defending anymore. It's time to take the fight to them." "Roger that," Sarah responded, her voice determined. Within minutes, the heavy artillery began to fire, launching projectiles with pinpoint accuracy, devastating the advancing alien forces. Jack watched as the tide began to turn in their favor. It was happening, the humans were gaining ground, slowly but surely. The alien forces, once so confident, were now showing signs of hesitation. For the first time in hours, Jack allowed himself a small moment of relief. They were winning. But that relief was short-lived, as a new threat emerged on the horizon. A massive alien warship, larger than anything they had faced before, descended from the sky, its engines glowing with ominous red light. Jack's heart sank as he watched it approach. This wasn't just an attack, this was an invasion. He knew that if they didn't take down this warship, all their progress would be for nothing. "Everyone, brace yourselves!" Jack shouted, rallying his troops one last time. "We've got one shot at this. If we go down fighting." The final battle had begun, and Jack knew that this was the moment that would define humanity's future. The stakes had never been higher, but Jack had one thing the aliens didn't, an unbreakable will to survive. And he would fight to the last breath to make sure humanity had a future in this galaxy. The massive alien warship loomed overhead, its red glow casting an eerie light over the battlefield below. Commander Jack Walker stood in the middle of the chaos, his eyes fixed on the approaching threat. This was no ordinary enemy ship, it was a behemoth, designed for total domination. The fate of humanity depended on what happened next. "Sarah, get everyone back to the defensive positions," Jack barked into his comm, his voice sharp and commanding. "We need to buy time to bring down that warship." The ground trembled beneath their feet as the warship unleashed a barrage of heavy fire, each blast shaking the very foundation of the human outpost. Jack's mind raced as he processed the situation. They didn't have the firepower to take down such a massive vessel directly, but they could disable its weapons systems long enough to turn the tide. He quickly began issuing orders, moving from one tactical position to another, his focus unwavering. "We'll hit them where it hurts," Jack muttered to himself, thinking through the strategy. The human forces had been fighting non-stop, but they were not yet broken. He could see it in their eyes, their determination had not faltered, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Sarah's voice cut through the comms again, steady despite the chaos. "Commander, we've reinforced the east side. We're holding strong, but that warship's firepower is overwhelming. We need a miracle." "We don't need a miracle," Jack replied, his voice low but filled with a quiet confidence. "We just need to fight smarter." He motioned to the officers around him, directing them to coordinate their artillery strikes with precision. If they could disable the warship's weapons, they could gain enough time to bring in reinforcements. As the artillery batteries roared to life, Jack watched with bated breath. The first few shots landed, creating explosions across the warship's hull, but it was far from enough. The alien vessel barely seemed to notice the attacks. Jack clenched his fists. They had to hit the right targets. "Focus on the weapon pods," he ordered, his mind already calculating their next move. The team followed orders, targeting the vulnerable sections of the warship. With each hit, the massive ship's weapons grew weaker, but it still remained a formidable presence in the sky. Meanwhile, on the ground, the enemy infantry pressed on, trying to take advantage of the chaos caused by the warship's bombardment. The human soldiers were doing their best to hold the line, but they were exhausted. Jack knew that if they couldn't finish the job soon, their position would be overrun. "Keep pushing forward," Jack shouted to his troops, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "This is our last chance. We do this together." As the humans continued to press forward, the artillery strikes finally began to take their toll on the warship. One of its weapon pods exploded in a massive fireball, followed by another. The massive ship trembled, its engines faltering for just a moment. "Now, hit it with everything you've got," Jack yelled. The final assault came in waves, with everything the humans had left focused on the warship's weak points. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. With a final, deafening explosion, the warship's core ruptured, sending a shockwave through the air. The massive ship was crippled, its once menacing presence now reduced to a smoking hulk in the sky. The humans had done it. They had fought back the impossible. As the dust settled, Jack looked around at the battlefield, his heart racing. The victory was theirs, but it had come at a great cost. His soldiers were battered and bruised, but they were alive. The outpost was damaged, but standing. Jack's thoughts turned to the future. They had survived this battle, but the war was far from over. They had proven that humanity could stand strong against the most powerful forces in the galaxy, but the challenges ahead would be even greater. "We've won today," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "But this is just the beginning. We've shown the galaxy what we're made of. And we're not stopping now." He turned to his team, seeing the same fire in their eyes. The war was far from over, but for the first time, humanity had hope. And hope was something no one could take away. The smoke from the destroyed alien warship still lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the battle they had just fought and won, but Commander Jack Walker knew this victory was only temporary. The dust was settling, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. The outpost had been badly damaged, but it was still standing, and for now, that was enough. His team, though battered and exhausted, had proven something that day. They had proven that humanity could fight back. But as Jack walked through the wreckage, his thoughts shifted to the bigger picture. The war was far from over, and they still had a long road ahead of them. The alien fleet had been driven back, but there were more coming, more forces that would test their resolve. "Commander, we've secured the perimeter," Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts, steady as always. He turned to see her approaching, her armor scratched and scorched from the battle, but her eyes still held that fierce determination that Jack had come to rely on. "Good work," Jack said, his voice low. "What's the status of the rest of the outposts?" Sarah paused for a moment, glancing at her datapad before responding. "We've lost contact with 2 of the outer colonies. Communications are down." Jack frowned. This was the moment he feared. If the alien forces were coordinating their attacks, they needed to act quickly before they lost more ground. "Send out a recon team. We need to know if the enemy is regrouping," Jack ordered. "And get me the status on reinforcements. We need to know if Earth can send help." Sarah nodded and moved to relay the orders. Jack turned his attention back to the battlefield. The victory felt hollow. They had driven back the immediate threat, but there were bigger battles on the horizon, and he knew that the enemy would return with greater force. As the hours passed, the situation only became more dire. The recon team returned with grim news: the enemy was indeed regrouping, and they were already mobilizing a second wave. "How much time do we have?" Jack asked, his voice tight with tension. "At least 24 hours, the recon leader replied. Jack's mind raced as he processed the information. They had time, but not enough. They needed to prepare, to fortify their positions and come up with a plan to survive the next wave. He gathered his senior officers and began making decisions. They would not wait idly by. They would fight, and they would fight smart. As they worked to reinforce the defenses and coordinate their forces, Jack found himself looking out at the stars, his thoughts turning to Earth. They had been abandoned by the Galactic Council, left to fend for themselves in the vast expanse of space. But that didn't matter anymore. The war had become their own, and they would fight for their future. "We've been underestimated from the start," Jack said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. "But we've shown them that we won't back down. The team around him nodded in agreement. They had come a long way since the first signs of the alien invasion, and each victory, no matter how small, had proven their worth. But the hardest battle was yet to come. As Jack looked around at his team, he knew that they would need more than just weapons and strategies to win this war. They would need hope. They would need to believe in themselves, in each other. And Jack would lead them, no matter what. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "We're fighting for a future. For our people, for our families, for everything we've built." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. They all understood now. This was about more than just holding a line, it was about ensuring that humanity had a place in this galaxy, that their future wasn't dictated by anyone else. "Get some rest," Jack said, breaking the silence. "Tomorrow we prepare for the next wave. We fight, and we win." As his team filed out of the room, Jack stayed behind, his mind focused on the task at hand. The war was far from over, but he knew one thing for sure: humanity was stronger than anyone had ever given them credit for. They had survived this long, and they would survive whatever came next. The morning arrived with a quiet sense of urgency as Commander Jack Walker stood at the front of the command center, his eyes fixed on the battle map that flickered on the holographic display in front of him. The night had been long, filled with the sounds of preparation and anxious whispers as his team fortified their positions. They had less than 24 hours before the next wave of alien forces would descend on them, and Jack knew that this battle would determine their future. "Commander, all units are in position," Lieutenant Sarah Fields reported, her voice steady but tired. "We've reinforced the outer perimeter, and the main defenses are ready. However, we still don't know how many ships are in that second wave. We could be facing more than we can handle." Jack nodded, his mind racing. He had calculated their chances 100 times over, and yet the numbers still didn't add up in their favor. He had to make a decision, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. "What's the status of the reinforcements from Earth?" he asked, turning to face Sarah. She hesitated, glancing at her datapad before responding. "Still no word, Commander. The communications blackout is still in effect." Jack clenched his jaw. "Then it's up to us. We've held our ground before, and we will do it again. This time, we fight smarter. No more waiting. We take the fight to them." He turned back to the screen, his eyes scanning the enemy fleet that was still in motion. "We're not just defending this time, we're taking the initiative. We'll hit them where it hurts." Jack's voice was firm, each word carrying the weight of leadership, and he could see the spark of determination in the eyes of his officers. They trusted him, and he trusted them. They would make this work. "All right, everyone. We're going to use the terrain to our advantage. The alien fleet may be larger, but they're not used to fighting in this environment. We'll set traps, we'll hit them hard, and we'll use everything we have at our disposal. Our strength is in our adaptability. We've beaten them before, and we can do it again." The room buzzed with activity as his team began to implement the plan. Jack moved swiftly from one station to another, coordinating the efforts of the defense teams, his mind constantly working through scenarios and backup plans. The enemy's ships were massive, but humanity had always been able to make the most of what they had. They might be outnumbered, but they would never be outsmarted. As the hours passed, the calm before the storm settled over the outpost. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something bigger than anything they had faced before. He turned to Sarah, who had been overseeing the final touches of the defense systems. "You good?" he asked, his tone softening just slightly. "We're ready, Commander," Sarah replied, her eyes meeting his with unwavering resolve. "We've done everything we can. Now it's just about holding the line." Jack gave her a nod, though a part of him wished he could give her more reassurance. But the truth was, there was no more comfort to give. They were standing at the precipice of something enormous, and only time would tell if they were strong enough to survive it. The hum of the defensive systems filled the air, a constant reminder of the war that had come to define their lives. Jack's thoughts drifted for a moment to Earth, his home, the place that had given him and his people everything, and now, they were fighting to protect it, to prove that they were worthy of that future. He glanced out the window at the stars. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to return to a peaceful world. But then the alarm sounded, cutting through his thoughts like a knife. The enemy was closing in. "It's time," Jack said, his voice resolute. "All units, prepare for battle. This is where we make our stand." The outpost's defenses came to life, and Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the alien fleet approach. This was no longer about survival, it was about proving that humanity had a place in the galaxy, that they could hold their own against the most powerful forces in the universe. The battle had begun, and Jack Walker would lead his people to victory, no matter the cost. The alien fleet was now almost upon them, its vast ships looming ominously in the distance. Commander Jack Walker stood at the heart of the command center, his eyes never leaving the tactical display as it flashed with the latest intel. His team had worked tirelessly through the night to set the traps, prepare the defenses, and coordinate every detail of their plan. Now, there was no more time for preparation, it was time to fight. "All units, position yourselves as planned," Jack said, his voice calm but firm, the weight of leadership pressing heavily on his shoulders. "We hold this line, no matter what." The room buzzed with activity as his officers relayed orders, moving quickly and efficiently. Jack knew that the odds were stacked against them. The alien fleet had been regrouping for days, amassing resources, and now, they had arrived in full force. It would take everything they had to stand their ground, but Jack refused to let his people falter. He had already seen them fight harder than anyone ever expected, and he knew that together, they could accomplish the impossible. As the first wave of alien ships entered the range of their defenses, the sound of distant explosions echoed through the air. The battle had begun. The humans fired their weapons first, striking at the alien ships with all the force their weapons could muster. But the enemy was relentless. Their ships far more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced. The blasts from the alien ships tore through the defenses, causing chaos and destruction as the ground shook beneath them. Jack's heart raced as he watched the carnage unfold. "Status report," he barked, turning to Sarah, who was overseeing the ground forces. "We're holding, but they're pushing back hard," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We need more time to disable their fleet's weapons systems." Jack nodded, knowing that time was the one thing they didn't have. The alien forces were closing in, and with each passing second, the chances of survival grew slimmer. But he wasn't going to give up. "Prepare the secondary defenses," Jack ordered. "We need to hit them with everything we've got." Full assault. The battle raged on, with every human soldier pushing to their limits, fighting not just for survival, but for their future. But as the enemy's ships began to get closer, Jack realized that they had underestimated the alien fleet's power. The alien forces were stronger than he had anticipated. He needed a new strategy, and he needed it fast. "Sarah, we have to adapt." "It's time for the last resort," Jack said, his mind racing through the possibilities. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't hesitate. "You're sure?" Jack nodded firmly. "We don't have a choice." In the far corner of the command center, the last of humanity's secret weapon, the experimental weapon they had developed in case of this exact situation, was powered up and ready. It was risky, untested, but it was their best shot at turning the tide of the battle. Jack made the call. "Initiate the attack." The hum of the experimental weapon echoed through the command center as it came to life, and the air crackled with electricity. The humans fired their last resort weapon directly at the alien fleet, targeting the central command ship. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Time stood still as the energy blast hit its target. The explosion was blinding, a brilliant flash of light that illuminated the sky. The shockwave rippled through space, throwing the alien ships into disarray. For a brief moment, humanity had gained the upper hand. But Jack knew this wasn't over. The battle had only shifted in their favor temporarily. The alien fleet would recover, and they would come at them with everything they had. As the smoke cleared and the alien fleet central command ship disintegrated, Jack allowed himself a small sigh of relief. But there was no time to celebrate. He turned to his team, his voice unwavering. "We've got a few minutes, but we can't waste them. Prepare for the final push." The humans rallied, reinvigorated by their temporary victory. They had struck a blow to the heart of the enemy's fleet, and it had shaken the aliens. Jack's resolve strengthened. They would finish this. Together, they would drive the aliens out of their galaxy. The war was far from over, but this moment would be remembered for as long as humanity existed. They had proven, without a doubt, that they were not just survivors. They were warriors, and they would fight until the very end. The humans had landed the first decisive blow, but the alien forces were far from finished. The momentary shock caused by the destruction of their central command ship was only temporary. The remaining fleet quickly regrouped, their weapons powering up again with terrifying force. Commander Jack Walker watched the sky above, his hand steady as they gripped the command center console. They had pushed the enemy back, but the war wasn't over yet. "Sarah, status report," Jack called, his voice cold and firm. Sarah's face appeared on the holo screen, sweat trickling down her face, her eyes tired but resolute. "We're holding the line, Commander. But they're coming in with everything they've got. We need more time to repair the secondary weapons." Jack's mind raced as he calculated the remaining time before the enemy would strike again. The humans had managed to create a hole in the enemy's armor, but it wouldn't hold for long. The pressure was mounting, but they were ready. "We can't wait for reinforcements from Earth," Jack said, determination in his eyes. "It's now or never. We're going to take their fleet down before they have a chance to recover. Every man and woman in this base is fighting for our future." As Jack rallied his troops, they set up one last line of defense, ready to strike again with everything they had left. The alien fleet, once so sure of itself, now seemed desperate. The shipyards were full of repairs, but every blast of human firepower chipped away at their resolve. With each passing minute, the enemy forces weakened. They were learning the true power of humanity's spirit. And then, the final wave came, stronger than the last. The alien fleet descended in full force, their massive ships blocking out the stars above. "Get ready!" Jack shouted to his team as the first wave of alien fire shot through the air. His heart beat loudly in his chest as he ordered the final counterattack. The final weapon was ready, the last resort they had kept hidden for this very moment. "Sarah, engage the final weapon," Jack barked. The room filled with a deep hum as the experimental weapon came online once more, its energy core pulsing. The air crackled with electricity as the first shot was fired. The beam of light shot from the weapon's core, cutting through the enemy fleet with a blinding flash. The aliens had never seen anything like it. Their ships began to disintegrate in the face of humanity's fury. The blast created a shockwave that rippled through space, sending the alien fleet into chaos. Jack stood in the command center, staring at the screens as his troops fired in unison. It was working, the enemy was breaking apart. But the battle wasn't over. As Jack's heart pounded, the warships that remained began to retreat. Their forces, already weakened, had no choice but to pull back, leaving the humans standing victorious in the wake of destruction. Jack's voice was low, filled with disbelief and relief. "We did it. We've won." But even as the last alien ship retreated into the distance, Jack knew the war was far from over. There would be more battles, more struggles ahead. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was just beginning to carve out its place within it. He turned to Sarah, who stood beside him, her eyes filled with the same mixture of exhaustion and pride. "We've proven ourselves, Sarah. But we've only just begun." Sarah nodded, her lips curving into a tired smile. "I know, Commander. But today, we showed them what humanity can do. We showed them that we are not to be underestimated." As the command center fell silent, Jack looked out at the stars once more. They had faced the impossible, and they had come out victorious. But he knew that the true battle had only just begun. The fight for humanity's future had only just begun. And Commander Jack Walker would lead them, no matter where it would take them. They had proven their worth. They had proven that humanity was not just a species to survive, but a species to thrive. The war for the galaxy was far from over, but humanity had found its place. And they would defend it with everything they had. Immerse yourself in a gripping story of humanity's last stand in this epic sci-fi adventure. Follow Commander Jack Walker and his team as they face overwhelming odds and fight to protect their future in the galaxy. In this tale of survival and resistance, the human race has been underestimated by the galaxy's most powerful forces, but they will not go down quietly. With incredible strategy, daring tactics, and a fierce will to survive, the humans prove they can match any alien power. This epic sci-fi tale explores themes of heroism, sacrifice, and resilience in the face of impossible odds. The battle for humanity's place in the galaxy is just beginning, and you won't want to miss a single moment of this epic sci-fi tale as it unfolds. Watch as Jack and his team use every resource they have to defend against an unstoppable alien force in this thrilling and action-packed adventure. Get ready for a tale that will leave you on the edge of your seat, with twists, turns, and heart-pounding action. This epic sci-fi tale is more than just a fight for survival, it's a story about the strength of the human spirit and the lengths we will go to in order to secure our future in the stars. Join us for this unforgettable journey as humanity proves that they are far from being the underdog in this epic sci-fi tale. 1. The climax of the battle on a desolate battlefield, with smoke rising from the destroyed alien warship. Commander Jack Walker stands at the forefront, eyes intense and focused, staring directly at the alien leader who stands in front of her troops. Jack, dressed in battle-worn military armor, is in a stance that exudes determination, while the alien leader, with her green skin, large eyes, and powerful presence, stands tall and unyielding. The atmosphere is tense, with explosions in the background, showing the full extent of the chaos. Jack's expression reflects both anger and resolve, while the alien leader's gaze is cold and calculating, her posture a symbol of authority. The moment is filled with an overwhelming sense of urgency and finality as both leaders prepare for the last confrontation. 1-2-2. Inside the human command center, a fast-paced and urgent atmosphere as the troops prepare for the battle ahead. Commander Jack Walker and Lieutenant Sarah Field stand by a large holographic map, both looking at the display with intense focus. Jack's expression is determined as he issues orders, and Sarah, with a data pad in hand, nods in agreement. The team works quickly in the background, setting up weapons and organizing positions. The scene is filled with energy and a sense of urgency, yet there's also an underlying feeling of readiness. Jack's leadership is evident, while Sarah exudes quiet strength, making sure everything is in place. 1-3-3. The arrival of the alien fleet, enormous ships descending from the sky, blocking out the stars. The alien leader, standing on the deck of her command ship, looks down at the planet below with an expression of cold authority. The camera zooms in on her face, highlighting her striking alien features, green skin, sharp features, and a look of unshakable confidence. Her eyes scan the battlefield with a hint of calculation as she prepares her forces for the invasion. The background shows the dark, ominous silhouette of the alien ships looming overhead, casting a shadow over the planet, symbolizing the impending threat. 2-4. The first major clash in space. Commander Jack Walker, in the cockpit of his ship, is seen fighting his way through the alien fleet, his face etched with determination. He is steering the ship expertly, eyes focused on the enemies ahead. Sarah Field sits beside him, her face reflecting the gravity of the situation as she coordinates the attack. The space around them is chaotic, filled with explosions and the flashes of laser fire from both sides. Jack's grip tightens on the controls, his jaw clenched, showing his focus and resilience. Sarah's hand moves quickly across the console, issuing commands as they work together to fend off the enemy. 1-3-5. A quiet, reflective moment in the command center. Commander Jack Walker stands by a large window, gazing out at the stars. The scene is calm, but there's an air of tension hanging over him. His face is solemn, and his posture slightly slouched as if the weight of leadership is taking its toll. He stares into the vastness of space, lost in thought, contemplating the battle ahead and the future of humanity. The background shows the dim lights of the command center, with a faint hum of machinery. This moment of solitude contrasts with the chaos of battle, symbolizing Jack's internal struggle. 1-6. Inside the tactical war room, Commander Jack Walker and Lieutenant Sarah Fields are seen making final preparations for the final battle. Jack stands at a large table, pointing to key locations on a holographic map of the battlefield, while Sarah reviews information on her datapad. The room is filled with soldiers working tirelessly to prepare defenses and strategize. The tension in the air is palpable, but there's a sense of control in the way Jack and Sarah work together. Sarah's face is determined, showing her readiness for the fight ahead. Jack's expression remains stoic, a leader giving everything for the cause. 1-3-7. The sudden and brutal surprise attack from the alien forces. Alien soldiers, clad in dark battle armor, storm the human defenses, overwhelming them with speed and power. The alien leader, watching from her ship, orders the attack with a cold expression, her eyes narrowing as she observes the chaos unfolding below. Her features are sharp and unforgiving, with the background showing the violent onslaught of her troops advancing toward the human positions. The camera captures the relentless advance of the alien forces, adding to the tension and the sense of danger. 2-8. The final push. Commander Jack Walker and Lieutenant Sarah Fields lead the human forces in a last stand against the retreating alien fleet. They charge forward, weapons raised, determination in their eyes as they make their way across the battlefield. Jack's expression is fierce and resolute, while Sarah's face shows the same unyielding strength. In the distance, the alien leader can be seen preparing to launch another assault, but her forces are faltering. The camera captures the intensity of the final battle, with explosions and flashes of gunfire lighting up the dark, war-torn field. 1-3.